I really do want to try to limit these videos where I'm just sitting here talking to you guys, because when I go back and watch them, I find them kind of boring. With that being said, today's video is just going to be me talking to you guys because we're going to talk about composition. Now, it's going to surprise you to know that I shoot a lot of people as well as landscapes. But today we're talking strictly landscape composition. And what I'm going to do is kind of go through some images I've taken in the past, go through them in Photoshop, kind of go through some of the decision making that was going through my mind as I was setting up the image, some rules of composition that I use, and hopefully you guys will find it interesting about kind of the process behind the camera that goes into making an image. Now, this is not going to be earth-shattering stuff. I use very, very basic compositional tools, leading lines, anchoring an image in the foreground, being very careful about the edges of my image. No earth-shattering stuff here. And I think when after this you go back and look at my images, you'll be like, yeah, he uses a lot of the same stuff in all of his images. So anyway, hope this is interesting for you guys. Let's open these up in Photoshop and see what we've got. All right, so let's just jump right in, and we're going to start with actually what I feel is probably one of my weaker compositional images, and that's the Towers of the Virgin here. And the reason I think it's weak compositionally is because there's nothing that really ties your foreground down here with your main focal point of the image, which is the beautiful light on the Towers of the Virgin back here. And I've found that to be a theme throughout my time as a photographer. If I don't really like an image, it's because there's nothing that draws the viewer in from the foreground all the way through the image to the background. So that may be something you want to look for if you find that you take an image that you're not really connecting with for whatever reason. In my experience, is because there's no connection between the foreground and the background. Nevertheless, I keep this image in my portfolio because, again, it's just such beautiful light, and I really like to be reminded of mornings in Zion, one of my favorite times in one of my favorite places. Okay, so we're just going to randomly go through these. Here's an image that I envisioned, and when I say envisioned, I mean that I stole directly from Ansel Adams. But one of my favorite compositions here, and you're going to start to see some of the tools that I use in a lot of my images, starting with the lower left-hand corner. There's this line of this tree that leads into the image. Now, my main focal point of the image is obviously Angel's Landing back here, and so I want everything to direct the viewer to that, or at least not detract, not take away interest from that. And this was really lucky in that these shadows were sliding across the canyon floor, and so it really provides a nice natural frame to the image. You've got this dark area down here, and your eye is not drawn to what's dark, it's drawn to what's light in the image. So it frames it nicely on the lower. You've got this frame on the left of the tree. I darkened the sky with a red filter, and then there's this nice area in shade in the back here. And so really everything directs the eye toward Angel's Landing. Kind of lucky in that the shadows were coming by right as I was shooting it. I did not plan for that, but the rest of the image I searched for. My buddy Mark actually found this tree, so it was a group effort, but really I feel one of my better efforts compositionally. I feel everything was joined together nicely in that image. Another image here where I feel it works well compositionally. I really had to work for this image too. But our main focal point of the image, we'll start with that. Again, this beautiful glow in the background, so we want everything leading toward that. Again, lower left-hand corner, got this line that draws back here, and those are really easy to find in these slot canyons. You got this also secondary line of where the whitewater breaks, leads back to that. And then over here, just luckily, these striations in the wall, again, they're kind of leading back here. And so everything points back to this glow, and that's where I want the eye to go. And then the glow itself, I've kind of stuck it in the right-hand third of the image. Again, classic photography rule there. But this is an image, again, I feel it's strong compositionally. Everything ties together with where I want the viewer to be looking. Let's see, this one, Archangel Falls here. This was tough compositionally. I wanted to shoot it in the landscape, horizontal orientation. The problem was, in the upper right, just out of frame, there's blue sky, there's direct light, and obviously that would be blown out in the image, and I don't want some distracting element here at the top drawing the viewer away. So I had to settle for a vertical composition. Oh, one more thing. I could have shot it horizontally if I had lowered my camera. The problem with that was I would be clipping off this pine tree, this lone pine in the background. And because it stands by itself, that's something I didn't want to clip off. So once I settled for a vertical orientation here, my thought process was I needed to balance this glow left to right in the background without clipping this tree. And then in the foreground, not clipping anything. I don't want to clip any of the white water here, so I was very careful on the edges of my image here and then in the midground back here not to clip any white water. By not clipping that, I feel they balance out left to right really nicely, and even though this was a tricky composition, I didn't get exactly what I wanted. I feel that in the end it worked out well. All right, another tricky composition here. This was a 14-minute exposure. And you can see the river goes through. There's not much in the way of cascading water. There's not much interest in the river itself. So one thing I did find was this kind of straight line of rocks here. And I used that as an anchor or lower frame to the image because my main focus is this fluted wall, this dramatic light on the wall. So I want the viewer to be looking at that as it sweeps left to right through the image. Now, one thing I didn't include in the image, you'll see on this right side, you've got these rocks over here. Those are very bright, and that actually extends for another 15 to 20 feet to the right. And because those are so bright, I wanted to limit how much those were in the image because I didn't want any distractions from my main focal point over here. So this was a tricky composition. It doesn't really follow any classic rules of thirds or leading lines or anything like that. But again, I feel that it works. I feel that the eye goes where I wanted it to. I did kind of burn in this up here. I guess kind of vignetted it so the eye wouldn't escape. It was a little bit naturally darker, but I added to that in Photoshop. Not too much though, hopefully. Okay, subway here. This composition is almost cheating because it was so easy. I knew that I wanted this line of rock, very clean line, leading in from the lower right. So that was my first thought as I was composing the image. Obviously back here with this glow, that's where you want the eye to end up. So you don't want to clip any of the glow. There's this nice, relatively straight line that I put at the top here to kind of act as a natural frame at the top. This piece of rock here that juts in, there's nothing I can do about that. I don't feel that it detracts from the image, even though it is clipped over there. But this is just something that orients very, very nicely for a 4x5, particularly with my 90mm lens. So there was a lot of thought as far as placing the line down there, but this just luckily lined up very nicely to the ratio of film I shoot. So obviously with this image, our main focus is this beautiful glow in these cottonwoods back here. That's where all the color is, and that's where eventually I want the eye to end up. Now we've got the river going back to it, so that's eventually where you're going to look. The trick was the foreground. Now you've got all this cascading water, and it actually extends further back into the left of this composition than I've shown here. But there wasn't much interest in it. I didn't feel that just cascading water was strong enough. So I found this rock here with not much water going over it, and I felt that was a strong enough compositional element to sort of anchor my image. With no leading line, I often look for rocks to anchor an image. Once I had that set up, it was just a matter of, on the right side, not clipping any of the wall over there, and on the left, not clipping these trees back here. And once I put all that together, I do feel that it flows together nicely. All your eye starts in the cascading water and ends up back here in the light area where I want it. This looks like a pretty straightforward image, but actually this was a tricky one compositionally as well. I don't like to cut things off, but there really was no way to keep from clipping off these trees in the background. They just keep extending further right, and really there's no interest beyond where these trees, where I've cut them off here. So I did kind of compromise to cut off that. I made the decision to stop my composition right there. A few things kind of directed me to that. One, this large boulder down here, I didn't want to clip any of it off. Just to the right of the boulder was actually an even bigger one that wasn't very pretty at all, so I wanted to not include any of it. Our focus is the beautiful wall back here in these trees, and I really like how the not quite prime color greens play off the oranges. I didn't want to cut any of this major cascade off down here, so I've given it plenty of room. And I said it was tricky in the beginning. You've got all this deep green water back here, so I was limited. I couldn't go move my camera much left. I couldn't back up too much if I remember correctly, but again, it looks straightforward, but my thoughts were not to clip the water down here, not to include an ugly boulder over here, compromise by cutting off the trees back here. And even though I did make those compromises, again, I feel it works well. There may not be the most flow to this image, but the dramatic light, I think, more than makes up for that. The back of Subway, this is one, again, I feel is cheating for how easy it was to compose. Beautiful straight line leading in from the lower right. And then on the left side, luckily, there's this huge pothole that I feel anchors it over here, really balances out the foreground. And then just these really, really interesting undulating walls. Once I set this anchor this leading line and anchor point down here, the rest of the image just fell into place nicely. But when I started this down here, sticking this line in the lower right corner, that was my first thought as I went to compose this image. All right, main focal point here is obviously the waterfall in the background. So I want everything leading to that and not detracting from it. It's pretty well balanced left to right. It could probably be moved a little bit more to the right, but you've got this flowing water leading in from either side in the foreground here. This image flows pretty well. Again, if I could go back, I would probably move my camera just a little bit to the left so this would be more evenly balanced. Again, straightforward, just a waterfall. Not too much to this image, but I did want to show that I used these rocks as an anchor point down here. If I had just left it with the water, if I had cut off my composition right here, there wouldn't be as much interest. Your eye would kind of fall out the bottom of the image. So I did want to include these rocks as a natural frame. Kind of moving through these relatively quickly. Not much interest in that one. Two trees, I balanced them. Obviously the trees are the focal point of the image, so I want everything leading toward that and not detracting from it. I feel that they're pretty well balanced left to right. Again, a smooth line leading in from the corners. I always try to pay close attention to my corners. And then the trees themselves, I placed them really, really high in the image because I wanted to emphasize the height they have over the mountains around them. I cut off the horizon line at about the top third, basic photography, rule of thirds. Again, this is not rocket surgery or brain science here. I use basic stuff, but I feel that again, this image flows well because of the lines, everything leading back to the trees, and then I wanted them really prominent in the image, and I feel that I was able to achieve that with that composition. Just wanted to show you this image because I don't like to clip off whitewater, and I had to on the lower right here. And the reason I had to do that is because there is a walking bridge just to the right. I mean, if I move my camera to the right an inch, you're seeing that bridge. So hope that doesn't take away from the sense of natural beauty you get from it, but there's a bridge over here to the right, and just behind me there is a bench that I'm setting up my camera on. So that's kind of typical for some of the things you get in the Smokies. This one was a tough one compositionally. I do have a line sort of leading in from the lower right here. The reason it was tricky compositionally is you got this beautiful tree here, and that's pretty much the focal point of the image. The problem is there's this branch that leads off to the right here, and it's really ugly. You can see there's no leaves on it. I had to cut it off, which I did not like having to do, but it would have really thrown the image out of balance if I had included this whole branch over here. As it stands, it's not the most balanced picture in the world. I wish I had maybe moved the right border to about right there, balanced it more left to right. Other than that, I wanted to really place emphasis on how massive this canyon wall was back here, so placed it at the very tip top of the image. That's a tool I use quite a bit to emphasize height. This one was probably one I would change. It's not drastic enough to keep me from including it as a portfolio image because I do like the dusting of snow on the trees there, but just something to look for, balance left to right, that it didn't quite achieve with that image. Some rules of my own I had to break with this one. This tree at the bottom, I wanted to use it as a leading line and as an anchor to the image. The problem is I had to cut it off right at its base here. Not really too concerned with that because it matches so well with the surrounding ground back here. The focal point of the image, this beautiful light and orange maples back here. So you've got this tree kind of reaching up toward that. I needed an anchor point on the left side, so you've got this very aesthetic, almost perfectly round. I know it's not a cactus, I don't know what it is, so we're going to call it a cactus over here. This one was pretty straightforward, but I feel that it did work well despite the compromises I had to make cutting things off down here at the bottom. Okay, we'll go through just a few more here. This one was really tricky. I know I've said that a lot, but the reason this one was tricky is these cascades here just keep going further down out of the frame. So I really didn't have a good clean foreground. And obviously you want everything to lead back here to this beautiful reflected light. So I just kind of arbitrarily placed my foreground. I knew I was going to have to cut off rocks. But over on the left side, I wanted this big boulder here to just, the tip of it just go on the left-hand border of the image. So I placed it there, and it actually works for me. I think the cascades kind of sweep in and lead your eye back to that. You've got this beautiful natural framing of the dark area up here, and then on the right side, it kind of keeps the eye on this glow back here. This patch of sand over here, about 5 people walked through that as I was taking the image, and of course there are ghosts. Can't see them. All right. Speaking of cutting off rocks, I had to do this in the Smokies. You can tell that there's just, I mean, you've got rocks everywhere. There's no way that you can get a good clean foreground. So once I knew I was going to have to cut off rocks, I made the decision. I didn't want to cut off this group on the left here. So that's what I was looking at in my foreground. Obviously, you've got the river leading through it. I stopped the river at about the upper third of the image here, and you've got this nice fallen branch back here that kind of acts as a smooth line to where the river ends in the composition. Other things I looked at, this kind of semicircle of water over here. I didn't want to clip too much of the rocks on this side because I feel that's kind of a nice aesthetic circle of water over here. And then because of that, I feel that acts as a good border on the right side. Tricky to know where to make that line, but just some of the things I decided to cut off and not cut off as I was making that image. Let's go with, all right, last one here. I know this has been long. Thanks for watching, keeping up with it this long. So again, basic stuff here. You've got a leading line from the lower left. This dark wall on the left side, cut it off at about 1/3. The river ends in the lower third of the image here. Got this really prominent wall over here that's roughly in the right-hand third of the image. Basic photography stuff. I wanted to make sure not clip off any of the tree over here. And of course this is just luck, but I love how this line of trees leads back here. And then you've got the water over here kind of leading back here. So this is an image, again, I've talked about flow in an image. I feel that the view kind of starts down here and then works itself back and maybe up to that glow over there. So again, an image or a composition that I feel worked well after I had messed this image up previously. So thanks for watching. I hope this helps. If you like the way I compose images, these are just some of the things that I think of as I'm composing image. If you don't like the way that I compose images, then these are some things for you to avoid in the future. So you're a winner either way. Thanks for watching. If you enjoy this content, give me a like, subscribe, comment below. That always helps out my channel. And we'll see you guys next time.